Hello everyone. In the last video we have installed Ubuntu server on a Raspberry Pi 4 device. In today's video guide we will see the steps involved in installing and configuring the MQTT broker. These videos are basically in continuation of the earlier videos where we have learned how to buy and configure a VPS. Since my VPS is already up and running and I cannot demonstrate the configuration steps in detail, I will be using the same Raspberry Pi 4 device which will behave as a simulated VPS environment. And for this reason, I have installed the same flavor of Ubuntu as the one on my Hostinger VPS. Now before we proceed, let me help you understand the steps involved in the installation and the configuration of the MQTT broker. So first thing that we will be doing is we will be installing the MQTT broker. The next step would be to configure the MQTT broker. Now under this we will enable the required ports and we will also enable authentication. The next thing that we will do as a part of configuration of the broker would be creating TLS certificates and enabling the TLS support in the broker. And once we are done with the installation and the configuration step of the MQTT broker, we will test it using the MQTTBox application. Now before we proceed, let me log in into my Raspberry Pi 4 device. The steps of remotely logging into your Raspberry Pi 4 device is already mentioned in the previous video. If you haven't watched that video, I strongly recommend to go and have a look at that video before you proceed. So once this putty window appears, you have to key in your username and your password. Okay, now let's proceed with the installation process. Okay, the first command that you have to run is sudo apt-update. Sudo basically means you want to run all these commands as a super user. So we'll say sudo apt-update. Provide the password. Now it says 5 packages can be upgraded. So for that what you have to do is just run sudo apt-upgrade, which is basically the next step. So over here you can see that no upgrade is required at my end and we can proceed with the next step. Now the next command is basically to install a couple of packages using the apt-get install command. So I just have copied it. I'm going to provide you all these commands in the description section. So feel free to copy it from there and just paste it over here. Now I'm installing the required packages. It might take a while. So once we are done with this, next step would be to install the Mosquitto repository. For that, use the command on the screen. Okay, now let's proceed with the next step, which is basically the installation of the Mosquitto and the Mosquitto clients. Now if you see here, we are saying sudo apt install. The first one is basically the broker and the next one is the client. If you want, we can always skip the client section, but if you might want to test the broker from the command line, you might have to install the Mosquitto clients as well. So let's go ahead and install both the packages. Now if you see here, it just has installed a Mosquitto service. Now the next step is basically to test if the Mosquitto service is up and running. For that, write sudo systemctl status Mosquitto service. Now over here you can see it is active and it is running. So this was basically the next command. So if you have reached so far, it means your basic Mosquitto installation has completed successfully. Now let's proceed with the configuration steps of the broker. Now understand that in the latest versions of the Mosquitto broker, you cannot connect to the broker without a username and a password. So you have to provide certain credentials. Now before you can provide the credentials, the first thing that you might want to do is you have to create it at the broker end. Now for that, all you have to do is use this particular command. Provide a password. Okay, let me explain you this command a bit. So over here it says, so basically the main command is mosquitto_password. -c basically means that you want to create a new file, right? And then you want to say, then you want to basically give the you know, the location of the password file that you're creating. Over here, the last keyword or the last phrase is basically the username, right? It could be anything. You can just mention admin and create another one, right? For now I'll just be using credence as the username and a password, right? Now if you want to create another user, let's say, and you want to call it admin, all you have to do is you remove this -c switch from here so that it doesn't recreate the file. In this case, what will happen is it will create a new user. Okay, before we proceed, let me just show you how it looks for now. I'm sure you will be able to see only one user, which is credence, right? Now if we run the same command again with an admin user, remove this. So we are trying to add one more user to the credentials file. For that, we have given the username as admin. Now give a password admin123. Now if we open the file again, you can see that there are two users that have been created. So this way you can create as many users as you want for your system. Now once we are done with the user creation, the next step would be to make certain entries in the configuration file of the broker, and for that you have to use the following command. And the lines that you have to enter over there are going to be, you have to add a listener at port number 1883, and then you also have to specify the location of the password file, right? So let's mention the same information in the configuration file of the broker. Now I'm going to save it, Control S, Control X to exit. Now what we have to do is we just have to restart our Mosquitto service. For that we have to write sudo systemctl restart mosquitto. Okay, I suspect that the password file doesn't have the execute permission. We will just go and verify that first. For that we'll just go to cd /etc/mosquitto, or we can even just list it right up front, mosquitto/password, and we will say -l for detailed listing. Over here you can see it just has got the read and write permissions. It doesn't have the execute permission. So what we'll do is we'll just say chmod. We'll use the same location. We'll say chmod +777 and remove this switch. Okay, I think I have to use I have to be issuing the command as a super user, so let me use the keyword sudo. So I think it's done now. Now let me just recheck the permissions of the password file. You can see it's read, write, execute for all sort of users. Now let me just try and restart the Mosquitto service. You can see it has started successfully. Let me also check the status of it. Okay, it says active and running. Now just to ensure that the configuration so far is correct, we will launch our MQTTBox application. You can always download this particular application from the Microsoft Store, or you can always go and get it from their official website. Once you have installed it, launch the MQTTBox application, create a new MQTT client, give a name, let's call it unsecure MQTT, or I'll call it RPI MQTT. Select the right protocol, which is going to be MQTT TCP. The IP address in this case should be the IP address of the your Raspberry Pi system. So for me it is 192.168.18.84. Now over here you have to give the username and the password that you have created. Now once you save, you can see that it has successfully connected to my Raspberry Pi broker. To help you understand, this is the client application which is running on my desktop, basically on my laptop, and it's connecting to the MQTT broker running on the Raspberry Pi 4 device. So far it's all good, right? Now in the next step we will enable the TLS support for the MQTT broker. But before we proceed, let's understand what TLS is. TLS is basically a cryptographic protocol. It stands for transport layer security, and it basically helps in three ways. It ensures confidentiality by encrypting the data that is being sent between the broker and the MQTT clients. It also ensures that the data integrity is maintained, and it helps prevent any modification or tampering of MQTT messages during transmission. And the next important thing is that it also ensures that the MQTT clients and the brokers can verify each other's identities. So TLS in a nutshell basically enables encryption of your data just to ensure that the data transmission between the broker and the clients is secure. Now to enable TLS, we have to generate couple of certificates. The first one is basically the ca.key and the ca certificate. The ca certificate is basically used to sign your server and the client certificates. We will be talking about the server and the client certificates next. So basically what happens in the real world is that the ca authorities and the ca certificates are pretty well known and globally trusted. So when you actually access any of the standard websites like Amazon.com or Facebook.com, it is very easy for our web browsers to establish the authenticity of those websites. Since in our case we are not going to be integrating our MQTT service with a third-party service or a component, we are good to go using our own self-created, self-signed CA certificates. The next certificate that we have to create is a server certificate. Now this certificate has all the required information that is basically needed to verify the broker identity, and this certificate is signed using the CA certificate. And the last certificate that we have to generate is a client certificate. Now this certificate is also signed by using the same CA authority, and it ensures that the encryption works flawlessly between the broker and the connected clients. Now let us proceed with the process of certificate creation. The very first certificate that we have to create is going to be a CA certificate. You can use the command that is being shown right now. I want to create all my certificates in a folder called MQTT certs inside a root directory. You can technically create your certificates anywhere you want. Now let me check my current working directory, which is home Abhishek. Now I'll switch to the root directory, which is cd/. Now what I'll do is I'll create a new folder called MQTT certs over here. Okay, I might have to do it as a super user. Okay, now I'll get inside the MQTT certs directory. Okay, now I will just issue the command over here. Now let me explain the command a bit. It says, so basically the utility that we are going to use, a library that we are going to use for generating the certificate is openssl, and it is saying that it is requesting for a new X509 certificate, which is going to be valid for 7300 days, approximately 20 years. And it is also providing the key file name as ca.key and the certificate file name as ca.crt. Okay, let's do it once again. It's asking for a passphrase. Let's give a password over here. Ensure that you note it down, because we'll be needing the password in future. Now over here for the country name and for the next details, you can either provide proper information or you can just put a dot and proceed. For the common name, while creating the CA certificate, you can always give localhost and just proceed by pressing enter. Now if you list it, you can see that you have two files created over here. The first one is ca.crt and the next one is ca.key. Right. So now the next certificate that we have to create is the server certificate, but before that we have to create a server key, and this is the command for creating the server key. Now let's use this command. It again uses the same library, openssl. It says generate RSA, which is basically the key thing, and it says output it with the name of server.key, and this is the length of the key. So if you press enter, okay, my bad, we have to use sudo once again. Now it has successfully created a server key. You can see a server key has been created over here. Now the next thing that we have to do is basically we have to create a server certificate signing request, which is also known as CSR. This is the command for generating the CSR. This command again requests the openssl library to output a server CSR file with the key as the server.key that we just have generated, and it's asking to generate a new CSR. So once you press enter, okay, now again you can input the correct information, you can just proceed with a dot and go ahead with that. Now this is the most important point where you should take a pause. The common name for the server, right, for the server certificate, right, should be the host name of your domain, right? If you are trying to generate a certificate for your actual VPS, if you're doing it for your Raspberry Pi, it has to be the domain name or the host name of the Raspberry Pi. I know the host name of my Raspberry Pi is RPI4. Let me show you from where do I get it. Now before that, let me just proceed and complete the creation of the server CSR file. Let's check it now. So now you can see over here the server.csr file has been created. Now before we proceed, let me just show you how you can get hold of the host name of your Raspberry Pi device. For that you have to get inside your router, basically the router configuration page. Somewhere in the list of your routers you can see a Raspberry Pi entry. I know this is the IP address of my Raspberry Pi, and the host name of my Raspberry Pi is RPI4. This is actually the place where you can find out the host name of your Raspberry Pi device, and ensure that we use that host name while creating the server CSR. Okay, now once we are done till this point, the next thing is we have to sign the server certificate using the CS certificate, and this is going to be the command for that. Now let us use this command over here. Let's put a sudo this time. Now if you see here, it is saying openssl x509 create a new request, input file will be server.csr, CA file will be the CA certificate, CA key will be the ca.key, and then it is saying create a serial, output a file called server.crt which is going to be valid for 20 years, right? Now once you press enter, it is going to ask the passphrase that I asked you to note it down somewhere. So I'm going to enter my passphrase over here. Okay, now let's check. If you can see here, the server certificates have been created successfully. Now let's proceed with the creation of the client certificates. Okay, there are a couple of points that I'm going to talk about, but if you see here, in the host name you use your local host or your domain name. Now this domain name is important to be used when you are creating a server CSR or a server certificate for your actual VPS or for a Raspberry Pi kind of a device, you know. And then I was trying to fill up the challenge key, which is actually not needed, so I just made a point out of that also. After this, there is something that we have to do. We'll talk about it a little later, but before that, let's proceed. We'll come back to this slide in a moment. Now let's go ahead and create the client certificates. So the command for creating the client, okay, now we have to follow the same commands for creating a client key, and then we will create a client certificate signing request, and then we will sign the client certificate using the C authority. So the first command is basically to create a client key with a password. Press enter. Now we again have to give a passphrase over here. You can actually use the same passphrase everywhere, so that just to ensure that you don't have to remember a lot of these passphrases. Okay, Let's press enter. Now you can enter the same passphrase that we used earlier, or if you want you can use a different one also. So the next step is basically to create the client certificate signing request. Now enter the passphrase that you just have used while creating the client key. Now let's enter dots for the initial 4-5 entries, and then in the common name you can just say local, or you can just say MQTT client. Skip the challenge password and the email address, and let's check that out if it has got created. So you should be able to see a client.csr. Okay, the next thing that we have to do is basically to sign the client certificate using the CA certificate. Now let's do that. Press enter, and then it is asking for a passphrase which has to be the same one that we use for the CA certificate or the CA key. Okay, now I believe we are done. Now we have successfully created all the required certificates. You can see we have the CA certificate, and then we have the client certificate, then we have the client key, the server certificate, and the server key. Okay, now the next step is that we have to make some entries inside your configuration file of the broker to enable these certificates. But before we can do that, we have to check the permissions of these certificates, whether they are executable or not. Now if you see, none of the certificates are executable, so what we need to do is chmod, I can use super user privilege plus 777 and just say asterisk, and now everything is executable. ls MQTT, let me check whether, okay, everything is fine now. So I believe we are good to go. Let's proceed with the next step, which is basically okay, so I think I already have covered two points here. First thing is leaving the challenge key as empty, and then modifying the privileges, or ensuring that the certificates, all the files inside your MQTT certs are basically executable, so which we already have done, right? You can see read, write, execute RWX privileges for all the certificate files, right? Now let's proceed with the next step. Now to make any changes to the configuration file, you again have to go to the same location, which is the default.configuration file. You have to open that file. So you have to write sudo nano. Nano is basically the, like we have a notepad in Windows, nano is a editor for your Linux system. And then we have to write etc/mosquitto, and then you have to go to conf.d folder, and then you have to say default.conf. Open this. Now if you see here, we already have our initial configuration in place. We have to add one more listener, because this is going to be the listener for the TLS enable service, and the port number would be 8883. Okay, let's check out the settings. Okay, let's also enter the first setting, which is socket_domain as IPv4. Socket_domain as IPv4. Then the listener has to be at 8883. Then we have to enter the CA file location. If you see here, there's something like a CA file location. All we have to do is we have to do MQTT_search/ca.crt. The next would be cert file, which is basically the cert file, which is basically your server cert file location. MQTT search server.crt, and the next would be key file for the server.key. Key file, key. Okay, and then we have to mention the TLS version that we are going to use. So it will be TLS_version is the key, and the value is going to be TLSV 1.2, TLS version 1.2. Okay, now let's save it by pressing Ctrl S. Okay, Now once we are done with this, we can clear the console, and then we have to do something like sudo system systemctl and restart mosquitto server. Let's see if it works now. Okay, we didn't got any error. It means it has restarted successfully. Now before we can proceed, we have to do one more step. We have to get hold, because you know what, we have our MQTT client running over here, fair enough, on this particular laptop. Now we have to get hold of the client certificate and the client key on this particular laptop, which has been created on this Raspberry Pi device. Now to be able to connect to a Linux based system, we use a software called WinSCP. You can download it from the official website. Now over here, if you see, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click at, okay, what you can do is you can just for the sake of demonstration, you can click on the new site. So over here you can either specify the IP address of your Raspberry Pi device. Over here you input the username and the password that you use basically to remotely log in into your Raspberry Pi while using putty. Okay, now once I'm done with this, I'm going to save this, and the site name would be RPI VPS. You can give any name you want. Click on login, click on update. It's asking for the password, re-enter it. If you are successful, you should be able to see you should be able to see the files that you have created on your Raspberry Pi. For that, you have to go to the root location and then get inside the MQTT certificates. These are my older certificates. I'm going to remove them, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy 3 certificates: the CA certificate, the client certificate, and the client key. Control C and Control V. Now we have copied these 3 certificates successfully on our Windows machine or on our laptop. Let me show it to you. So if you go to this particular location, you have all the 3 files. Let me just delete it once again and show it to you once again. ca.crt. Now if you see here, there are no files. Now we are going to copy the CA file, the certificate file, the client certificate, and the client key once again from the Raspberry Pi 4 device and paste it here. And once we do this, you can see that the files have appeared over here. Alright, now we have the required files over here. Now to create a connection using these files, what we have to do is we have to create a new client. I'm just trying to create a new client just for the sake of demonstration. You don't need to have so many clients. This client I'm going to name as secure MQTT RPI. Since it's going to use the TLS port and the TLS functionality, we have to use the protocol as MQTTS/TLS. Over here we have to give RPI VPS as the host name, colon 8883 as the port number. Now we have to choose the CA file. This is the CA file for us. Click on the client certificate, choose the client certificate, choose the client key, and while creating the client key, you must have given a client passphrase. You have to enter the same over here. Once you're done with this, you have to enter the credentials also. And once you save, if everything is successful, your device should get connected. So can you see it got successfully connected over MQTTS using this particular host name. Now let me show you an interesting thing. If instead of the host name as RPI VPS, if I just give the IP address of the broker which is running on the Raspberry Pi 4 device, you can see you just got an error. The reason for getting this error is that in the certificate of the server, basically the server.certificate file, the host name that we have given is RPI VPS, and now we are trying to make a connection using the IP address. Now this IP address and that particular domain name or the host name is not going to match, so it will not work. The moment we put the same domain name or the same host name that we have used while creating the server CSR, and then for the one that we have used for creating the server certificate, the moment we do this and save it, you can see that the connection has established again. One last important thing that I would like to mention here: for some reason, if you change the certificates at the server end, then you should also delete and recreate the credentials file I'm really not sure why the older credential file wasn't working for me, but if at all it doesn't work for you, or you're not able to connect to the MQTT broker after updating the server certificates, I suggest deleting the credentials file and recreating it. This particular guide is actually going to help you install and set up the MQTT broker on any of the Ubuntu systems, and it is really not dependent on the underlying hardware. So the same guide will technically help you if you want to implement, or if you want to install the MQTT broker on cloud hosted VPS as well. So that's pretty much from my end. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for my upcoming videos.